Earlier this week, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch issued a report documenting atrocities committed in western Tigray, including an ethnic cleansing campaign that amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. The report said Fano, a paramilitary force from the Amhara region, Amhara Regional Forces, and Ethiopia's National Defense Forces, cooperated to seize western Tigray in conflict that featured indiscriminate shelling, arbitrary detention, and execution of innocent civilians. This was later followed by an ethnic cleansing campaign where Amhara forces systematically displaced hundreds of thousands of Tigrayans from western Tigray in a bid to remove the majority of Tigrayan population. The human rights groups conducted more than 400 interviews and used satellite imagery to prepare this extensive report on atrocities in western Tigray. We had a brief stay with human rights expert Marathon Futui regarding this extensive report, and let's take a look what he has to say. Thank you, Ato Maratu Futui for joining us here. So I'll go directly to my questions. So the investigation by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch details extensively atrocities committed in Tigray, in western Tigray, by Ethiopia's National Defense Forces and militia from the Amhara region. The atrocities in western Tigray have been widely documented throughout the conflict. So I do not suppose you were surprised by their findings, but was there anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, among the things that stood out for me is actually the methodology part of the investigation. I usually envisage that any investigation on atrocities, on gross human rights violations, on a commission of international crimes shall take into account the necessary elements, shall see not only the incidents, but also the indicators, the lens through which you can check whether the things that I have mentioned are committed or not. Like, for example, when you investigate whether international crimes are committed or not, you have to take into account whether the mental element for the commission of certain crime is present or not. One of which is actually the specific intent, particularly when you go to genocide, because the investigation has kept silent about whether genocide has been committed in western Tigray or not.
The ethnic cleansing campaign detailed in the investigation by these two human rights groups is, of course, just one feature of the violence committed on Tigrayans. I mean, could it be said that the ethnic cleansing campaign was just one feature of the genocide committed on the people of Tigray? Do you believe the human rights groups maybe shared away from that conclusion for some reason?
Ethnic cleansing can consist of a bunch of crimes, like, for example, killing, murder, massacres, torture, and others. Normally, ethnic cleansing will be genocide if the necessary mental element, which is called a specific intent, is fulfilled. When you say specific intent, either it is desired by those who commit the act and the planners behind all the atrocities, or at least there is the knowledge part. So in this case, I think it is conspicuous, it is very clear that it is genocide. Almost all the elements of all the acts of genocide have been fulfilled, and they have been termed or they have been considered as ethnic cleansing. And so ethnic cleansing, the one who is claiming that it is ethnic cleansing shall believe that the mental element is not fulfilled. However, in the case at hand, the mental element can be easily proved without going far, without going to any other indications, simply from the actors themselves. Look, for example, the people of Tigray in western Tigray have been denied things necessary for living. Even being there, they have been denied from humanitarian assistance. They have been denied, according to the research itself, according to the investigation itself. They have been denied from medicine, health facilities. All their crops, all their means of livelihood is taken away. So, one, their life there is a condition of life which will ensure their partial or full destruction. As you have said, they are shying away from from calling it genocide. I think one of the reasons might be, well, it might be said that if they call it genocide, the peace process might be hindered. If it is genocide, I believe that it should have been called genocide. The atrocities are committed by Amhara militia and Fano. And before the atrocities are committed, and in fact, in the course of the commission of the atrocities, a number of hate speech have been disseminated by Amhara media. This should have been considered. This should have been analyzed, whether it indicates genocide or not. So they are shying away, and the reason might be, one reason might be to, not to hinder the peace process. But I believe that finding out the truth, the fact is one way of facilitating peace and reconciliation. The other reason to shy away from calling it genocide might be to ensure or maintain territorial integrity, because genocide might entitle for self-determination, including secession. But the territorial integrity, I personally might have different opinion. However, territorial integrity of Ethiopia shall not be at the expense of denying facts, shall not be maintained by denying facts, by hiding atrocities which are tantamount to genocide.
In the recommendation section of the report, the human rights groups call for the establishment of an AU-led peacekeeping mission in Western Tigray, classifying it a contested area. Do you believe this may be perhaps set a dangerous precedent where one party, through violent occupation of an area, can establish some degree of legitimacy there?
EU has failed. I believe that the international community has failed as far as the atrocities committed in Tigray is concerned. It could have been easily prevented, and it's not prevented. Not prevented, not only it's not prevented, still it is going on. People are dying. People are dying because of starvation. And starvation is, by the way, one way of committing genocide. Because starvation is denial of all necessary things for life. So one thing, the legitimacy of EU as far as handling the issue of Tigray is actually debatable. For me, it's not legitimate. It has failed. This recommendation cannot be logical extension of the conclusion of the investigation. The investigation has depicted a number of atrocities committed by Amhara militia, Fano, and the Ethiopian Defense Force. So, if you conclude that certain people has committed certain atrocities, you do not reward them. But this recommendation seems to connote that certain atrocities has been committed by this. So the people who have committed these atrocities shall be rewarded by bringing a kind of illegitimate organization. This rewards for the wrongdoer from their wrongdoing. There is one maxim in this legal studies which says that no one shall be benefited from his wrongdoing. So, Amhara militia, Fano, and others shall not be benefited from their wrongdoing. I don't mean that this shall be resolved by armed struggle or by war. There shall be legal solution, but the legal solution shall first put the warring parties into status quo ante, in their previous position. Then after that, there can be a number of options, legal options. There can be, constitutional mechanisms, even if it might be considered that this is an extra constitutional issue, there can be other legal remedies.
Thank you so much for joining us.